Kenyan's Statehouse is spending more than the White House. I know you're imagining that. Let that sink in. And now, Fred Matiangi has come out and said, give me that 17 billion shillings and watch what I will do with it. The numbers coming out of Treasury are shocking, and the question being asked are what the government does with that amount of money. On Thursday, April 30th, 2026, Deputy Party Leader for Jubilee, Dr. Fred Matiangi, sat down for a radio interview and did not hold back. The former Cabinet Secretary went straight at the State House budget, questioning how a presidency with no maternity ward and no operation theatre can justify spending 17 billion shillings in a single financial year. The argument was simple and cutting. Kenya is borrowing money. That borrowed money is supposed to develop the country, but instead of going to hospitals and schools, a disappropriate amount is sitting inside State House. And according to Matiangi, that is not governance, that is wastage. And if Kenya cannot fix that, the country will sing. Those are not soft words from a man who once served in the same government. Matiangi went further and made a very specific challenge. If that 17 billion shillings was handed to him, the former CS said the first thing he would do is to take away 14 billion shillings immediately. Out of the 14 billion shillings, 7 billion shillings would go to hospital and health care. The other 7 billion would go to education. And the remaining 3 billion, he says, he would return it at the end of the financial year because State House simply does not need it. That statement cuts deep because it puts actual numbers on the argument. It is not just a general complaint about spending. It is a direct, itemized, alternative budget delivered on radio for everyone to hear and compare. And the comparison, according to Fred Matiangi, to Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital made it even sharper. One of Kenya's biggest referral hospital versus State House. One is struggling with resources. The other one just got 17 billion shillings. So now let us look at what exactly the Treasury document shows. Because this is not just about Matiangi. There are official government figures submitted to the National Assembly by Treasury Cabinet currently John Mbadi. In June 2025, Parliament approved a baseline budget of 8.3 billion for State House. That already seemed high, but by the end of February 2026, just 8 months later, that figure had nearly doubled to 16.998 billion shillings. And how did it get there? State House initially requested an additional 2 billion in October and September 2025, citing operational expenses. Further, the disbursement was then approved under the Article 223 of the Kenyan Constitution, and the spending kept climbing. The controller of a budget, Margaret Nyakango, had already raised a red alarm, warning that State House was at risk of exhausting its entire budget before the financial year even ended. When the control of budget is warning the State House might run out of money, the year is not even close. That tells you something very serious about how that budget is being managed. Now, here is the part that really puts things into perspective. The White House, the residence of the most powerful man or leader on earth, spends the equivalent of about 12.6 billion shillings in each financial year. German presidential office spend around 7.1 billion shillings. Portugal spends around 2.6 billion shillings. And France, one of the wealthiest country in Europe, spend approximately 17.5 billion shillings, while us, a third world country, is spending 16.9 billion, among the same as France, more than Germany, more than the White House in America. And within Africa, the gap is even more striking. Nigeria spends 3.1 billion on its president. South Africa, which is economically higher than Kenya, spends 7.8. Algeria, 8 billion. Tanzania, 1.7 billion. Kenya, with its all economic challenge, public debt, and staggering public service, is spending more than its presidency than any other of the countries in Africa. That is not a small detail. That is a fundamental question about priorities. Look at where the money is actually going. Make the picture even clear. Of the 16.998 billion allocated to State House, recurrent expenditure, meaning day-to-day running cost, accounts for 16.1 billion. Development spending sit at just 894.91 million. So nearly out of the 17 billion, only about 895 million is going towards actual development. The rest, over 16 billion shillings, is going towards operation and running cost. The Treasury records also shows that between December 2025 and February 2026 alone, payment totaling to 4.4 billion shillings were made. That is 4.4 billion shillings in just 3 months. The current allocation also represents the highest State House budget since 2013, a full 13 years, and it marks a 3 billion increase from the previous financial year when they stood at 12.02 billion shillings.